the Hurlei, the Ostrogoths, and the Vandals. I gave them in a different order. So we should expect, and I haven't addressed this, which in hindsight I should have done, that we dealt with the testimony of two, didn't we? Testimony of two things should be established. There's the development of that prophecy, of that interpretation technique, where you can develop this into a triple application of prophecy, where you see that events happening in a three-step process. Okay, and I think I did mention this briefly, but we know that we have pagan Rome, papal Rome. Actually, I think I did mention this, but I said I'll develop the point. And we have papal Rome coming up the second time. This is after 1798, or after the deadly wound. This is from 538 to 1798, or before the deadly wound, and that's pagan Rome. And so we have Rome coming up 3 times. I'm going to call that 2A and 2B, because we said Rome comes in 2 phases, part 1 and part 2, but the second phase comes up twice, and it's to do with the deadly wound. So once the deadly wound is inflicted upon it, Revelation 13 says the deadly wound is going to be healed. The papacy is going to be resurrected, and we dealt with that briefly when we said that in Revelation 17 you have the 8th head. Someone asked about the 8th head. That's the resurrection of the papacy in the future. Okay? That's the 3 phases, 1, 2 and 3. So we know upon the testimony of two things is established, if pagan Rome had to take down 3 geographies, papal Rome had to take down 3 geographies, we should expect that when papal Rome comes onto the scene of history again, they should take down 3 territories. Okay? And if you look at the territories that we've spoken about so far, they're going to be taking down the USSR, which was geography. We should be expecting, we know that they're going to take down the world because there's going to be a worldwide Sunday law, that's geography. So when it comes to the glorious land, that again is geography, it's not dealing with a church. Let's go to Jeremiah chapter 3, verses 18 and 19. Jeremiah 3, 18 and 19. In those days the house of Judah shall walk with the house of Israel, and they shall come together out of the land of the north to the land that I have given for them, the land I have given for inheritance unto your fathers. But I said, how shall I put thee among the children, and give thee a pleasant land, a goodly heritage of the hosts of nations? And I said, thou shalt call me my father, and shall not turn away from me. This verse clearly shows us that the glorious land is not a church. The glorious land is a land or a country that's given to the church so it can do its role. This verse says very clearly that in those days the house of Judah shall walk with the house of Israel, and they shall come together out of the land of the north, which is the land of Babylon, and the land that I have given for inheritance unto your fathers, which is a pleasant land and a goodly heritage. So you see there's a separation between the people of God, because the people of God are his church, and they're in the kingdom of the north, in Babylon, in the land of the north, and God says, I'm going to take you out of that land and put you into a goodly land. So can you see that there's a distinction between the church and the land? Let's go to Psalms 106, verses 23 and 24. 106 verses 23 and 24. Therefore he said that he would destroy them. Had not Moses, his chosen, stood before him in the breach to turn away his wrath, lest he should destroy them. Yea, they despised the pleasant land, they believed not his word. Who are the they that despised? Israel. And what did they despise? The pleasant land. They don't want to enter, when they're at Kadesh Barnea, they don't want to enter into the pleasant land. So it says God was going to destroy Israel because they despised the pleasant land. The land is not the people. The land is the geography that God had promised to Abraham. Exodus chapter 3, verses 7 and 8. Exodus 3, 7 and 8 says this, and I am come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them out of that land into a good land, and a large, unto a land flowing with milk and honey, unto the place of the Canaanites and the Hivites and the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites and the Jebusites. So God told Moses that he was going to bring his people, they're already his people while they're in Egypt, to a good land, a land flowing with milk and honey. Let's take this note, that it was already a good land before Israel were given it. In fact, it was in the hands of the Canaanites who, are idol worshippers. So this land is a good land or a glorious land, and it's already glorious or good before the church even enters into the land. Can everybody see that? So the land is already good, it's the land flowing with milk and honey, and the question is, were they a church before they entered into the glorious land? Were they already a church? Exodus chapter 20 verse 5 and 6. And say unto them, Thus saith the Lord God, in the day when I chose Israel, and lifted up mine hand unto the seed of the house of Jacob, and made myself known unto them in the land of Egypt, when I lifted my hand unto them, saying, I am the Lord your God, in that day that I lifted up mine hand unto them, to bring them forth of the land of Egypt into a land that I had despised for them, flowing with milk and honey, which is the glory of all lands. So this land is a glorious land, a good land. Exodus 20 verses 5 and 6. And he said, I chose you while you were... Oh, sorry, Ezekiel. Thank you. Ezekiel 20, the reference was twice, Ezekiel 25, 5 and 6, not Exodus, sorry. So they're already made a church when they're in the land of Egypt, and God said he's already spied out a land to them, which is the glory of all lands. It's the best land that's available in the whole world. He's already chosen that for them. It's already glorious and goodly, so with milk and honey, before they even enter into it. Ezekiel chapter 20 verse 15. Yet also I lifted up my hand unto them in the wilderness, that I would not bring them into the land which I had given them, flowing with milk and honey, which is the glory of all lands. So Canaan is the glory of all lands, or the glorious land, which was so while Israel was still in the wilderness, even before they entered into it. The point is this: the land is not glorious because God's people are in it. It's glorious because it's a land flowing with milk and honey, and this is why it's given to God's people, because it's already glorious. It's the glorious of all the lands. Psalms 105, 43 to 45. And he brought forth his people with joy, and his chosen with gladness, and gave them the lands of the heathen, and they inherited the labour of the people, that they might observe his statutes and keep his laws. Praise ye the Lord. Who owns the glorious land? It says the heathen do. Why did God give his people this land that was full of Psalms 105, 43 to 45. Why did God give his people this land that was full of resources and temples, and full of resources both temporal and spiritual? It's got gold. It's got gold, silver, brass, already had the wells dug, already cultivated. They had to do nothing. Everything was already prepared for them. So why does he give it to them? The reason is this. Could they keep the Sabbath in Egypt? No. Did they have religious freedom in Egypt? No. Were they persecuted? Yes. They could not keep the commandments of God in Egypt. They could not sacrifice. Remember, the lambs and the goats. That's why Moses said we have to go outside of Egypt, because we can't even make sacrifices. So he brought them to a land where they would have spiritual freedom. Jeremiah 2 verse 5 to 7. Jeremiah 2 verse 5 to 7. Neither said they, where is the Lord that brought us up out of the land of Egypt, that led us through the wilderness, through a land of deserts and pits, through a land of drought and of the shadow of death, through a land that no man passeth through, and where no man dwelleth? And I brought you into a plentiful country, to eat the fruit thereof and the goodness thereof. But when ye entered, ye defiled my land, and made mine heritage an abomination. So God brings his people to a plentiful land, but they defile the land. So the glorious land is a land flowing with milk and honey. It's a plentiful country, a country where they could worship God in accordance to the dictates of their consciences, which was the glory of the whole earth, but was rich in natural resources.
Jeremiah
2:5-7. Great controversy 252. Great controversy 252. In the 17th century, thousands of pastors were expelled from their positions. Many were driven across the ocean to America, and here laid the foundations of civil and religious liberty, which have been the bulwark and the glory of this country. Great controversy 291. Great controversy 291. When God's hand seemed pointing them across the sea to a land where they might find found for themselves a state and leave to their children a precious heritage of religious liberty, they went forward without shirking in the path of providence. Great controversy 296. So no, I'm going to skip that one. Great controversy 296, but it's a valid one. I'm just going to go to this last one. Review and Herald, May 2nd, 1893. Review and Herald, May 2nd, 1893. The unrivaled mercies and blessing of God have been showered upon our nation. She's talking about the USA. It has been a land of liberty and the glory of the whole earth. The glory of the whole earth. There's a whole prophetic study of how God's people go from Israel and enter into the United States. Keepers of the Flame does that. I think Manjit's done a presentation. I don't know if it's on one of his DVDs, but there's a presentation. There's a clear line of prophetic movement where you can show how God's people moved from Israel into the United States. Acts 7. Let me ask this question. Do God's people have to be in the glorious land to be a church? No, they don't. They're a church whether they're in the glorious land or whether they're not. We've already seen clear historical evidence for that from the scriptures. The land is a separate thing from the church. The land is glorious not because the church is in it, but because it serves a prophetic purpose. Did they become a church after they entered the glorious land? No. While they were in Mount Sinai, they were not in the glorious land, but they were already a church when they're at Mount Sinai. So we know that the glorious land is not the church. The glorious holy mountain is the church. There's a distinction between the two. And just last point, just to tie that up, Acts 7, 37 to 38. Acts chapter 7, 37 to 38. It says this: this is he that was in, talking about Moses, this was he that was in the church in the wilderness with the angel which spake to him in Mount Sinai, and with the fathers who received the lively oracles. Another simple logic. Revelation chapter 12. Where is the woman? In the wilderness. She doesn't have a land. She's in the wilderness state. And that's the exact same idea that's given in this verse here, the church in the wilderness. In the time of Israel, they start off in Egypt, go into the wilderness, then they go into the promised land. Before 1798, they're locked under the they're locked in Egypt. I'm going to use that idea that they're locked into the world. No, I won't use that idea. I don't want to confuse you. Let me just bring up another argument. Where are we headed today? Where do we want to go to? We want to go to heaven, the heavenly Canaan. Where is the church of God? On earth. Where is Canaan, or the promised land? In heaven. You can clearly see that even from that basic understanding, the church is not the land. So when he says the papacy enters the glorious land, he's not talking about it entering the church, whatever church you want to make it. Whether you want to make it the Seventh-day Adventist church or Protestantism, it won't work. I'll show you another reason why it won't work. We have 1798, and I'm going to put 1989, and we have 40B, and we've got 1989. Can you see that first you get this stage and then you get this stage? 1798, 1989. He says the papacy enters the glorious land. We're in verse 41 here, where we see the glorious land.